Guten Abend, mein audience. I want to make a declaration that our ships in World War I are still missing, and Norman Lamont is alleged to have sunk some of them near his newly emerging tax haven. The reason I have my hand over my left tit is because this is the joke that all of the profiteers in all world wars share about what has it got in its pockets is, and what they're looking for is that. Yeah, this is the icon of power that rings through the Conservative Party and right into New Labour's profiteering regime. And we were talking about, when my batteries failed the last time, the deployment of redcoats in the culling of people at Culloden. Okay, let's get jiggy with it, as Ali G would say, and let's get into our civilian clothing again, and let's get close up and comfy with all of the jokes that they shared. When I stopped the last time, we were just in the revelations that the golfing clubs have been created for the first time anywhere in the world in Scotland, where the speculative societies thrive, as the SS before it was launched in Germany. Okay, we were talking about blind King George, and we got down to the timelines for King George II, and there is the defeat using a Duke of Cumberland, who's a German. The king's second son ruthlessly represses the rebels. Disarming Act bans Highland dress, weapons and bagpipe music. That's 1747, way before Alistair Hutton from Kelso launches the military tattoo in Las Vegas. Yeah, when it's an entirely for-profit exercise, and that is much more innocent than any of these great conflicts. And we've got the launch of the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, founded the world's first golf club, 1744, the year before the Stuart menace was put down. And I've now found the videos on the Herzogs and the Fitzcarraldo triumph of getting the ships to the top of the mountain in the joke about the ownership of the world. Yeah, that's Fitzcarraldo out of Hollywood using the Kinskys, who are interlocked with the Rothschilds in the world's ownership team, but are jokers in the Hollywood romanticism. Okay, and I think we got down to disarming Act. So we got down to Charles Edward Stuart and his friendship taking him back to exile in France and Italy for a time. Okay, now we move on to 1754. Joseph Black discovers fixed air, carbon dioxide, and that is the launch of the global warming scam that got me banned globally for revealing the scams of Bill Clinton's foundation and all of its companies that are interlocked to the man who makes the Chariots of Fire joke about the war dead and the Anzac war dead and Mr. Bean at the London Olympics. His name is Lord Putnam, Chancellor at Sunderland University when they made me a professor. Yeah, that's 1754, and that is launched because of the gall of the criminals and the SS, which is the speculative society in Edinburgh. It's launched in a city called Auld Reekie, because the smoke there, when they're actually using the coal, which is why they sunk the collier at Gallipoli, yeah, it is legendary for its smog, and that is centuries back when we were burning coal. God can easily fix that, and the global warming thing that they are now whinging about is just another profiteering scandal. It's going to be a tax on breathing. 1748, David Hume publishes an inquiry concerning human understanding. That's the pacifists that are now the Lib Dems and have stopped speaking to me since I revealed that their ancestors sparked World War I on the Hume Bridge in Sarajevo in Turkey, which is the Bill and Ben and the flower pot men joke because of the hats they wear at Gallipoli. The Cannon Ironworks near Falkirk use new systems of, not green systems, of coke-fired smelting for producing guns for the Royal Navy. And that is the German Royals, which is why I was making the parody in the red coat at the beginning. Like the German victors in the suppression of the Scottish armies, if they ever actually exist, because the earlier videos I've made today reveal the totally deceitful news releases of global historians. They're just like the inner circle writers. Okay, let's scan down and see what else we can find. The whole of Scottish history is a scandal, and the whole of world history is an even bigger scandal, because the elites that owned it 2,000 years ago are still in charge. Okay, here's George III, 1760. That's mad King George III. Becomes king on the death of his grandfather, George II. 1762, land tenure reform leads to the Highland clearances and massive emigration for several decades. That is the issue of the poor stealing bread from the German kings and their friends on the massive estates, who largely are from England, and they largely originated in France or in the Danish and the Viking nations. And all of it is totally twisted, and all of it suppresses the ordinary working people. And we told you yesterday about the union leaders in Glasgow who had all of their family of 8 to 10 children in the same room in the tenement blocks. And that is the Bruins joke that is shared with the world in the horrible yellow tartan that is also on the cover of Oor Wullie and the Bruins story out of Glasgow, and that is also sang about by the Alexander brothers. General Alexander is involved in British conflict all around the globe, and the Alexander brothers are really sickening. It typifies what Scottish culture is all about. James Watt patents the condensing chamber in the steam engine. We've now got the capacity to generate steamships. 1769, just 50 years or so before the Crimean conflict, when the Caradoc had Prince, the Duke of Cambridge, on board offshore in Gallipoli in the Crimean conflict in the Dardanelles, where the troops get siphoned into their deaths. James Boswell and Dr. Johnson write about their trip to the Highlands and Islands, 1773. Norman Lamont had no holdings at that time in Orkney. The first cotton mill opened at Rothsay. The Rothsay Bay music, all sung about by the Alexander brothers. By 1780, a mill near Glasgow employs 1,000 people. Yet when they come back, all of those jobs are gone, and when they go on strike, they get culled by the tank commanders from the south. 1782 to 1820, the Highland clearances again, ever such a topical subject for these people that have their hands in their pocketses. Highland landowners clear their estates of poor tenant farmers, forcing many to move to Glasgow, Edinburgh and abroad. 1783, Glasgow Chamber of Commerce founded. That's where Alistair Hutton has the Borders Chamber of Commerce registered. For reputational reasons, he's also the head of the British Legion and is a pacifist like the Humes further down the Tweed Valley. 1786, Robert Burns' poems are first published as poems chiefly in the Scottish dialect. They are an immediate success by the bimbos, who are portrayed all through human history as the orcs in the Lord of the Ring film. 1788, penal colony established at Botany Bay in Australia, where the rehab victim for both the Braveheart movie and the Gallipoli movie, directed by Rupert Murdoch, as we pointed out in episode 1 of this massive global scandal. That's Rupert Murdoch, who now owns all of the world's free press, and his daughter Lizzie is married to the psychiatrist in the Chipping Norton set that runs Britain as a subsidiary of this globalised fraud team. 1800, the first Gaelic Bible is published. Do you see it? If you can confuse people, and I've just watched the last ever episode, or it's actually a Red Nose Day fundraiser for the Vicar of Dibley, about women being brought into the contention to become the archbishops and to be joined the priesthood in the first place. It's just amazing. Everything they do is a sin, and all of it is laughed at by everyone who's far enough up the food chain. John Playfair publishes a summary of James Hutton's theories of geology. That's the geology joke about Gallipoli, and not really knowing that the motive for Gallipoli and the Crimean was the oil in Russia on the steppes. Okay, 1813, David Livingstone, missionary and explorer, born in Blantyre. 1817, the Scotsman newspaper first published. It's been relocated, so I cannot know where to visit and do my lobbying with the posters round my neck about the real news. Okay? Here we go. Who we got here? King George IV, 1820 to 1830. Not very long as a king. George IV accedes to the throne, having spent the last 9 years as Prince Regent for his blind and deranged father. Do you get it? George III, who must have been a decent man, because he was interned in straitjackets for most of his life, and he's the one that got the blue blood diseases, yeah, and portrayed all in the Hollywood film. What you've got here is a declaration that it's not blind Prince George of Cumbria who married Queen Victoria when she was only 14 and he was in his teenage years, and he fathered Queen Victoria's only child that was legitimate within wedlock, because her marriage to Prince Albert, who was killed by these families, was bigamous. She was already married to blind King George of Cumbria, who went back to Germany as a blind Hanoverian and spent the rest of his life there with a second wife. Okay, and all of it is covered up by the Rothschilds, and Nathan Mayer Rothschild and one of his inbred relatives sire all of Queen Victoria's illegitimate children. I think there were 9 of them, and one was sired by John Brown, which is the Scottish joke, and all of that was overseen by Disraeli, and all of the treason occurs all around the world, and the only thing that matters to them is that they cull the person in the communist movement, yeah, and that's why they put the red coats on the troops, because when they're finished with their loyalist duties, they get culled as part of the poor people's army, yeah, and that is really, really vicious, and it goes on again and again and again. Nothing highlighted in the next few decades. Let's go down. Great fire burns for 2 days in Edinburgh's High Street and Parliament Square, which I visited recently. Okay, Felix Mendelssohn visits Scotland and Stafford, and which inspires him to write the music for Fingal's Cave. That's not Dr. Fingland, who specialises in straitjackets and training in the police. It's Fingal's Cave, and it's ever so romantic and is ever so reminiscent of that man Mendlesson, who's the war criminal several centuries later, interlocked to the Rothschilds and interlocked to the Conservatives before Tony Blair's spin doctors kick in as genocidal war criminals. Who we got here? William IV, 1830 to 1937. Nothing highlighted. Victoria, Queen Victoria succeeds her uncle William IV. Okay, Queen Victoria was not eligible to be a royal until she was married to the German prince. Yeah, I don't remember how he got blinded, but the stories that were told by Greg Hallett are replayed further down. Okay, 1843, disruption in the Church of Scotland over the issue of patronage. All of the sectarian violence is premeditated. The Christian Bible is sectored into the Gaelic version, the Church of England version, the Church of Scotland version, and all of the printing takes place in Oxford and Cambridge using the Ronnie Barker lineage and using the people from Tynedale, using the people from the West Country in the Bristol region, and using the heirs. Some of them translate it, some of them print it, and you've got Oxford and Cambridge University Press, and the stories I told in the last video about Cambridge University and Jesus' college there. It's got an icon of 3 cocks crowing as part of its joke. So it's Jesus College Cambridge. It runs all of the financial services scams involving our Navy, our Army, and our false history team. That's Blackadder, Baldrick, who is now Sir Tony, whatever his name is. Yeah, he was knighted by Blair. Yeah, and all of that is openly declared. And when you look at the reason why they had the mastectomy incident, it's because they're asset stripping the NHS and they're demonising a doctor who interlocks with them on the boards of the frauds involving the Army, the Navy and the Air Force. And his name is Elwood, because that's a joke about some of the Hollywood output earlier on. Okay, and L is hell and wood is the Christian cross, and all of them think it's ever so funny. 1848, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert lease the Balmoral estate, which they later buy. That's Prince Albert, who wore a chain through the penis through all of his lifetime because he was incapable of having sex with her, and she was having sex with Nathan Mayer Rothschild and his illegitimate and his world-owning bloodline, and that is the goldfish. The goldfish is Nathan Mayer Rothschild's penis. Glasgow has 330,000 inhabitants, including many Catholic immigrants from Ireland. Do you get it? You mix them in, you create rangers, and that is created as a gesture about the Gers and the places on the south of the Black Sea where the Rothschilds come from that share the same name. Okay, and that's where the Queen's corgis also emerge from. 1/3 of Scottish families live together in a single room. The waters of Loch Katrine provide Glasgow with piped fresh water, helping to reduce outbreaks of cholera and typhus in the city. Yeah, and I think that the Crimean War was fought in the 1830s. Yeah, 1836 or thereabout. I may be wrong on that, but it is really, really huge. 1871, Scotland wins the first international rugby game against England. The Calcutta Cup is made from melted down Indian rupees as a joke about the empire upon which the sun will never set. Yeah, until you lot wake up. Alexander Graham Bell demonstrates the telephone. Collapse of the City of Glasgow Bank, 1878. Okay, I've not got anything else highlighted on here, and I got interrupted in the middle of this yesterday. There's Edward VII, king on the death of his mother, Queen Victoria, and I think he might have been the Orcafat one that had Marcus Manoel, the only child that was legitimate from Queen Victoria's bloodline. They had him killed. I think it was back in Germany, but you need to look up the works of Greg Hallett to get all of that. Edward VII dies in 1910 and is succeeded by George V. Okay, George V, 1910 to 1936. That's his reign, that's not his lifespan. So any of these people could be the people that are involved in the siring of the illegitimate children, because that's what the Rothschilds do now all over Europe. Okay. 1918, the end of World War I. The German battle fleet surrenders to the Allies at Scapa Flow. In Orkney, the German fleet scuttles itself in Scapa Flow. Unemployment reaches 20%. 1921, as soon as the war's over, they make the troops work for 50 hours for their working week. When the troops go on strike to make their working week 30 hours and to share jobs with their unemployed colleagues, they get the tank commanders from the south and the Walter Scott Foundation and the peelers to suppress them with tanks in Glasgow city centre. That's the radical wars. At the end of the Napoleonic conflict, the loyalists who fought to put down the communist menace were killed when they returned to Britain, and that is the radical wars. 88 of them executed just as a Freemasonic joke. The number 8 means that everything continues unabated, and 88 is like 2 Formula 1 courses side by side, and they continue to spiral around in fascist scams. Okay. Scotsman John Reith, appointed Director General of the newly formed BBC. Alexander Fleming, that's not the tax exiles and the war criminals, discovers penicillin, but it is very close to where I used to work at the Lindo wing at St Mary's Hospital in Imperial College London, where everybody had all the false news imposed in 2012 about Prince George being born to the Duke of Cambridge. That's William and Kate, soon to be successors to the throne. Scottish Nationalist Party, founded in 1934 entirely for a cash bung and for treasonous reasons, and to create a fourth tier of government that sucks the money out of everybody's pensions and pay rises, and is just a subsidiary of corrupted Westminster. There's the stammering king, accedes to the throne on the abdication of his brother Edward VIII. He's got an IQ of 70, which is why his wife that was picked for him by the Rothschilds flees to Denmark, and he's forced to marry the maid from downstairs in the royal household. She's a really ordinary person, like commoner Kate, and she's loved by the public because she shares with them the GG joke about the world's elites. That's the Governor General, and the horsey joke about the Pisos and the hippos and the icons for world leadership. And she's just an ordinary person, and you should see the massive mansions that she has up in Sutherland with all of the financial criminals like the Vesties and all of the people that own all of the land and originated from distant places, most of them, or many of them, from the German homeland. 1941, Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy, descends by parachute into Scotland. That's one of Rudolf Hess's body doubles. The North of Scotland Hydroelectric Board, formed 1943, right in the middle of wartime. And that is the energy that now we have to pay for 20% price rises year on year, and all of the companies that used to be publicly owned as nationalised initiatives now belong to Europeans, largely Spaniards and Portuguese. And Portuguese is the haven for the Marcus Manuel's relatives that Greg Hallett was in support of. But they forgot to mention that all of those people were involved in the culls at Gallipoli and the Crimea, and they were on the Caradoc offshore from the crime scene and where the genocides occurred. 1945, the end of Second World War. All of the loot is into the havens, all of the citizens' gold is into Fort Knox, and all of it is a massive scandal, and the next plan is to scam them into the European Union. Okay, and all of the people for the IRA are trained in Spain. All of the Nazis are laundered out in yellow submarines on the River Spree using the Fleming family and the Operation Winnie the Pooh stuff that we now know all about. That's the links to the rabbits and the puka joke. Okay? Right then, let's keep going because I'm going to run out of batteries. Oh, there's HRH. And she was brought out of Kenya where the Mau Mau massacres were, and she only slept with Prince Philip for 2 years. That was enough to sire Charlie Boy and Princess Anne. All of the rest of the family are sired by the drug-running triumvirate. Yeah, that is the people that fish on the River Bourne and write romantic fishing stories. That's the Plunkett Greens. The other ones are Lord Carnarvon, and I forget the third person in the triumvirate in the early days, when Mountbatten, the father of Peter Sellers, and the need for the false historians at Gallipoli, called Sellers, yeah, they are actually involved in the running of the narcotics into the South Pacific for 3 decades when Prince Philip is the head of the Navy. Yeah, and all of her grandchildren are sired by other monarchs, and that includes the children of Princess Diana, and some of the fathering issues there involve King Juan Carlos, who covers his crimes, even the shooting of his own brother so he can become the king, by shooting rare species in the World Wildlife Fund scam run by Prince Philip as well. Okay? The General Assembly of the Church of Scotland in 1968 permits the ordination of women as ministers. Watch the Red Nose Day episode of The Vicar of Dibley. It is really, really sick, and it is an accurate portrayal of how politics and religion ticks along in our country. Okay? And look at the interlocks between the Time team, the Lords, the House of Lords, and the false religions, which are Jesus College, Cambridge, and the 3 cocks crowing on its iconic symbol. Okay? Right then. Local government reorganisation, 1975. All of those tiers of being supported by the taxpayers, and the taxpayers and the public sector workers never get a pay rise ever since. North Sea oil is piped ashore in 1975. Launch of BBC Radio Scotland for the false news. Terrorists blow up the Pan Am flight over Lockerbie. Yeah, all of the corrupted judiciary that are involved in that are listed on the Speculative Society, and you can find them, like the ushers, on my web page. The ushers are relatively decent. They know what I'm trying to do, and they want to be part of it, and they do not want to be threatened by the acts of God that are taking so many of their friends down. Okay? Piper Alpha disasters, false news all over the renewable oil complex, and the renewable oil concept is covered up by the Cold War and the release again and again of the communist menace. The Russian scientists understand that if you take chalk and some water and you put it at high pressures like we have in the subterranean environment below the Earth's core, then you can produce oil spontaneously. You do not need dinosaur fossils, and that is why they manipulate the price at the forecourt relentlessly. Okay? I'm wasting a lot of time on this, but we've got there the launch of Donald Dewar, Scotland's. So a Scottish Parliament sits for the first time in 200. Listen carefully, political traitors, to this, because the story about McCluskey is just the same. He's the head of the Better Off Together movement, who within a year of the referendum was interned, with all of the religious clerics and all of the quisling politicians surrounding him in crocodile tears. Yeah, that includes the war criminals in Iraq, Malcolm Rifkind, and John Anthony Chilcot, the inquest chair. All of them were at McCluskey's funeral on behalf of the better off together cabal that steal relentlessly from the Scottish people. Okay, 1999, a Scottish Parliament sits for the first time in 272 years. That's Parliament in inverted commas. They just soak up the cash and they dismember our country's competency with all of the political erect rules that we are now imposed. Donald Dewar of the Scottish Labour Party elected, that's another socialist, elected as First Minister and forms the Scottish Executive in coalition with the Scottish Liberal Democrats. That's the Humes and the pacifist people. 2000, 1 year later, Donald Dewar, Scotland's First Minister, dies. God has an impeccable sense of timing, and if you do not see it coming, then you should have a little look at world history and what happens when the seismic events occur. Yeah, and what happens when the earthquakes occur, what happens when the volcanoes erupt, and the human behaviours behind all of that. Yeah, the pathology theory is scaring the shit out of the world's tyrants, and that includes all of the recently abdicated monarchy and the recently elected popes, who are also genocidal leaders with massive limps. Okay, the new Scottish Parliament, they do not mention that it went 10 times over budget, and my mate Lord Davy Steele is in charge of that, and he's an arse-licker for the Fleming families in the tax havens, because they're war criminals and they determine the future of Syria's funding and its brutalisation by NATO's armies, which David Cameron is decent enough and God-fearing enough not to engage in after a period of time, because he knows that really well-educated fraud researchers are coming after them if they do that as war criminals, which is why Tony Blair resigned last month. Scottish National Party becomes the largest party in Scotland. World banking crisis 2008, that's the total collapse of the banking system, and I've explained the speculative society in Scotland's role of that. Sir Ewan Brown got his knighthood when we revealed his role in it, and he's now the boss at St Andrews University, where Ali Moffat is the boss in the geopolitical news release sector, and he's a citizen of the borders with his BBC headquarters in Falkirk, and he's a millionaire because he tells lies at the honest people's expense. Okay, right then, local militias. I think we might have done that this morning about the Cambridge militias and all of those unjustified deaths. When I visited St Giles in Edinburgh, it was really sad. Yeah, this is the 2 battalions suffering great hardships as prisoners of the... Yeah, so we did this morning, and we went into missing in action, and that was about the Dukes of Cambridge and the 2 that are involved in the legitimisation of Queen Victoria. She was not a royal at all until she married into blind King George's bloodline. That made her eligible to be married as a king or a queen, but they would not allow them to be in love together, because that might threaten the tyranny of the Rothschilds in determining who their sexual partners have to be, and they have to be Rothschilds. It's an obligation. Okay, so we covered that. We covered all of the links to Culloden, Tipperary, and we've got the Marcus Manoel character, the involvement of Peter Sellers in the cover-up of all of those scandals by making the Being There movie on the Isle of Wight. Yeah, and there we have the current day Prince of Wales, who had his children in the Lindo Wing at Imperial College London, where I used to work. And I met the Duke of Roxburgh, and that is all part of the false news system about Rupert Murdoch's Australian press people ringing in to ask prurient questions that lead to the suicide of a nurse in that very elite place. I don't know what the Lindo Wing means, but I will find out for you. Okay, and there's another victim, Lady Diana. Okay, everybody who's decent gets it in the neck. Right, so Harlot 4 truncated, and let's have a look and see whether we got to the bottom of this. Yeah, I think we did. And all of these Germans live in London. Yeah, and they die in their beds still in London. Some of them go back to Germany, and those that are legitimate claimants to the English throne get killed by the orca fat people that are also illegitimate claimants. Yeah, and that is becomes the Windsor bloodline. And I've told you about them being named Adolf, and Greg Hallett tells the story much more clearly. But when you can see that what they do is they blend in the George III madness story in the Hollywood films into the blind story. Nobody's ever heard of blind King George of Cumbria. Even the people that work for G4S and come to run every sporting tournament all across Scotland, they're from Cumbria. They've never heard of the Gruppenführer, yeah, that had his hands in his pockets and had his hands inside Queen Victoria's knickers. And that was a genuine love story, and she writes about it in all of her memoirs, and that's where the false history kicks in. Okay, blind King George of Cumberland, who became blind King George V of Hanover, he was married to Queen Victoria on the 18th of September 1833, and Marcus Manoel was born on the 25th of April 1834, her only legitimate child. Yeah, he had to be killed, and Greg Hallett, I still believe, was killed. If the Greg Hallett that I knew is still alive, he is actually being treasonous because he's covering up the story about the London Olympics joke, and he's an Anzac. He's a loyal New Zealander, death threatened out in New Zealand, and all of these millions of books that he's published have been openly read by the whole of the free world, in inverted commas, for 12 years. Yeah, none of them get taken into lawsuits. He's totally accurate in everything he says, and when I repeat the story or interrogate it and go a little bit deeper, as I'm doing now, then when I publish it, all of the cover-ups appear in the newspapers, and the stories that we told about Carenza in the Time Team's breast operations, yeah, and the implantation of silicone breasts in what was a series of crimes by an incompetent surgeon in oncology, that's just a fear story to launch CPD into the healthcare industry. Yeah, and that is like the Jamie Bulger, which is a cover for a geopolitical scandal involving Prime Minister Bolger in Australasia, and all of it keeps the people in fear. It undermines all of the professions, and when they become part of the Royal Society, that's a goner. Yeah, they're gone, their decency's gone. They have to pay every year for the right to work as experts in their own sector, and that keeps them too busy to notice. Yeah, so here's Lewis Mountbatten and all the siring of Peter Sellers. He tries to muscle in on the triumvirate and gets topped by the IRA. That's the story. Yeah, and because I worked at Imperial College London, you used to see all of the people that came into the ITU that were in the political sector. They were heavily policed with automatic weapons, and the policemen were sitting outside the door, and I had to pass by, a little bit like our birthing chambers at RAF Halton, where my eldest son was born. And all of that is in the Rothschilds epicentre. Yeah. Right then, so I don't think I've highlighted anything on here, but you can find that in Greg Hallett. It's in the Hallett report number 4, and it's all a graphic illustration of the illegitimacy of the monarchy for 160 years. Okay, this is the book that was put together in the last few months of Greg Hallett's life. He reported openly the changing of the laws of succession that led to that suicide in the Lindo wing when Prince George was born to Commoner Kate, and all of that was told openly to the world, and his interviews and videos, all of that case has now been dropped since he was disappeared and stopped communicating with me on Skype. And what he used to do was to send me his PDFs so that I could broadcast them openly to the free world. I'm not charging people for my PDFs. I want to free the world for free as an amateur loyalist to the world. I've worked in both hemispheres, and it could be a really decent and civilized world. Yet were it not for these ruthless leadership teams who are prepared to kill anything that moves if it's innocent and outspoken on behalf of the scams that they have run for 2,000 years, if that is to be believed. Okay, so look for the Hallett report. That's Halleett. When I was talking about Hallett's stuff in 2012, and my wife was hearing it in the room next door, that's when we got involved in the divorce proceedings, because my wife is raised in the Rothschilds' thrall from Hertfordshire, where all of our friends are part of the financial frauds. Yeah, that's the Pritchard family, the Criddle family, and it is just massive. All of them are into the laundering, and all of my farmer mates and even the technicians then are now part of the financial services frauds. I have nothing to hide, and nothing is going to be suppressed until they kill me. Right then, so you should find that it's fascinating. You can sit in your room with a glass of gin like the Queen Mum would have done, and you can listen to the whole story, and it's published by Jim Fetzer, who was scandalised by my information on Christianity, and its interlocks to the war crimes joke and the university theft project. Yeah, and he's not invited me to speak again, and even if he does, I will not be allowed to talk about the massive religious frauds. Yeah, and when you see the Time team interlocking with the vicars and the Church of England representatives, and you see that Cambridge colleges are using the three crows, the three cocks crowing as a denial that Jesus ever existed, with the 8 crowns as the icon for King Henry, the launch of the Church of England and God's representatives on this earth. The corrupted monarchies. Okay, so Crimea won the Light Brigade, and it needs to be covered up in World War I. Not sure what this is. Oh, it's a timeline. Okay, so what I thought I was looking at when I saw the Caradoc and the Prince, the Duke of Cambridge's presence in the Gallipoli conflict was not actually the Gallipoli conflict in World War I, but it's actually way back in the Victorian era, and it is the Crimean, the Light Brigade, and it needs to be covered up as the World War I incidents. Okay, so we've got 1853, the launch of those massive armies. So Britain was fighting with the French against the Russians, and you know now what they were fighting for. June the 8th, 1853, the British fleet approaches the Dardanelles. When they got into the harbour, yeah, in the Dardanelles, in Turkey, they sunk the ships in the harbour because they knew that the soldiers would not be going home alive. Isn't that clever? And the winters launched the balaclavas, and you know, the freezing to death of the troops in the trenches, and that in the end, along with the plague, is what stops the massive conflict and the cull of all of those innocent conscripts. You've heard of press ganging, you've heard of conscription. All of it happens openly on the streets of all of our democracies, and by that time you've got the Zionist leadership team in the form of Disraeli that covers up all of the breeding chamber issues of Nathan Mayer Rothschild and his goldfish behind his zipper. But all of that is laughed at openly in Punch, because the citizens of that day realise how the country and the world is run, and that's why it's in the Punch magazine, and that's why the comedians nowadays will not contact me, but they make the Red Nose Day jokes, and a lot of them have horrible pathologies. Yeah, on the board of the Red Nose Day, you've got people that were advisors to the Prime Ministers, that's the Cahills. Yeah, you've got Stephen Redgrave, the elite rower, he's got horrible diabetes. You've got J.K. Rowling, she's got horrible MS in her family, and she's ever so nervous now that I understand that she lives in the House of Shaws that used to be the Rothschilds. Yeah, sorry, it used to be the Balfours and the Robert Louis Balfour Stevensons, and that is the launch of globalism, and Stevenson making his way towards Monterey in California, where globalism is launched from. Okay, October 30th, British fleet enters the Bosphorus. Russians defeated by Turks at Oltenitsa. Turkish naval squadron destroyed at Sinope. Allied fleet enters the Black Sea. This is all where the Rothschilds came from. Yeah, and where the Amazons came from, which is the joke about the Amazon jungle and the Fitzcarraldo getting the ship to the top of the mountain, and the jokers in that case are Germans, and they are the actual descendants now to the Stuart throne that takes us back to the massacres at Culloden, and the prince, the second son, who was the Duke of Cumbria, and he brutalised the Scottish armies in those massacres. And a man called Preble writes about it. He also interlocks with the Rothschilds. Okay, and my wife has all of those books in her collection. Yeah, because she totally understands all of this. Yeah, which is why she left some of her little chattels behind. That was given me by her brother, because he works in the Chippen Norton region, and he asset strips the dental sector and robs all of Britain's dental students and imposes those massive fees on them. Okay. Landing at Calamita Bay, Battle of Alma. Now the Princess Diana was killed in the Lalma tunnel, and if you translate Lalma from Yiddish you get the apple. So Princess Diana was guilty of the original sin. That's the joke. It's really, really sick. Okay, arrival of Colonel Williams at Carr's flank march of the Allies around Sebastopol. British arrive at Balaclava. They freeze them to death in the severe winters joke. And about the only thing I inherited from my father-in-law, yeah, a Rotary Club and a Probus Club, yeah, entirely designed to steal from our country, and his brothers run the asset stripping of the British Railways under Beeching's thrall. Everything that we had competence in has been taken from our country. Death of St Arno. I don't know who St Arno was, but it will be a religious joke too. Patriotic fund set up. Isn't that good? Yeah, like the Blackadder funds that we heard about this morning. Yeah, and the links to the NHS asset stripping, the links to the British Army, the British Navy and the British Air Force. That's Sir what was Baldrick's real name? Yeah, he's the fundraiser for the Labour Party for all of Tony Blair's genocidal years. Battle of Inkerman, hurricane in Crimea. Yeah, I've explained that to you. It's in the winter time. It is an act of God, and that is what brings all of the massive conflicts, even at the Russian front in World War II and the Napoleonic exercise, onto the Russian front in the revolution that was run on both sides by the Rothschilds entirely for cash. Sir Edmund Lyons replaces Admiral Dundas as commander of the British fleet. That's the Dundasses that was in the porcelain in the toilets. That's another joke about the dysentery, and the Andrew's liver salts joke about people in the homeland in the pinstripe suits running the draft board having problems with constipation as all of the British troops die as emaciated victims of dysentery in the trenches. Admiral Bruat succeeds Admiral Hamelin. That's the Pied Piper joke, the rats in the trenches joke. Russian feint an attack on Balaclava. Russia attack on Eupatoria. I found out the stories about, in the Odyssey story about Jason, there are links to the little white bull, and that is a link to the name of the woman who was raped, and her name is Europa, and that is the launch of the Tommy Steele Little White Bull songs in the 1960s, when Mary Poppins was written to laugh at the asset stripping of British banks by people in bowler hats. Okay, Sardinia joins the Allies. Fall of Lord Aberdeen's government. Lord Palmerston forms the new government. Tsar Nicholas I, succession of Alexander II, March the 2nd. Vienna Conference opens. Second Baltic expedition leaves Spithead. Fierce fighting on the French left at the Quarantine Cemetery. And there's the Canrobert names, and there's the Ketch joke about the yachts and the elite sporting events. Yeah, all of them are tied in loosely to the names of the generals and the admirals. Canrobert resigns command of French army and is succeeded by Pelissier. Ketch sails again. Do you get it? Yeah, and that is part of the Philadelphia story joke about the Ketch and it being yawl, and the yawl story is about the launch of Jehovah and another false religion. Allied naval forces enter the Sea of Azov. Third bombardment of Sebastopol. First Russian attack at Kars. So this is all of the stuff that you're able to find now. There's nothing left about the World War I genocide except what the Time Team historians with the same names as Peter Sellers and co. Yeah, and Mrs. Doyle in the Father Ted jokes. And the name of the book that I've been taking a lot of the facts for, thinking this is the World War I genocide, where Mr. Bean was the correspondent, it's actually the Crimean conflict. Okay, General Sir James Simpson appointed to command the British Army. Have you heard the name Simpson before? In an abdication context, in a warmongering context, and in the marriages of abdicated kings. Yeah, with very low IQs. Have you heard that story before? Anyway, we're spending a lot of time on what is a historical timeline, and as you know, history is very inaccurate for the profiteering reasons, but we're beginning to see more and more of the European conglomeration threat and the Eurozone scams. Yeah, and there's Pasha that was able, with a few hundred troops and a few German commanders-in-chiefs like the Kinskis, yeah, who are capable of getting boats up the sides of mountains in the Amazon region, which is the Black Sea region. The Amazons are the giant women that fight against Pharnaces and fight against the Roman armies led by Julius Caesar, with the same initials as Jesus Christ, perchance, and that is the Jesus College Cambridge joke. French magazine at Sebastopol explodes. Right then, surrender of Kars. The Tsar accepts the Austrian demands, and we know now that the Tsar is the man who asset stripped Hearts Football Club. That's Romanov with Rothschild as a middle name. Okay, Paris Peace Conference opens. Paris is the really peaceful place where most of the big propagandists work, and they have a great time in all conflicts and all through peacetime. And their pressmen are particularly vicious because they now turn on Islam at every opportunity, and they did that in World War I too, and that's the Dreyfus case, and that launches Dreyfus into Hollywood, and he makes the Jaws film about getting horrible scars on his legs because of the sharks, and that's the Tiny Roland's Gill joke out of Oxford, and Tiny Roland's into Lonro and into the diamonds and the gold mining in South Africa as a totally fascist-led initiative. And the Lonro boss now is Prince Charles's financial advisor with business links into Geneva. And he runs a girls' school in London right under the illegitimate St Giles Cathedral. That's the Jesus joke. Armistice in the Crimea, Treaty of Paris signed, ratification. And when I tried to get the ooh la la music of Brittany to reveal Bill Clinton's massive global cabal and the global warming frauds, they shut my website down globally, and everything that I've posted today on these issues on Facebook has been blocked. I am given no thumbnail because I'm revealing the treasonous behaviours of all of the world's leaders through all of biological time since they learned to read and write. And now that they've taught me and my mates to do that, then they're in a really dangerous place. And this is the last tab. We'll stop on this one. This is the Flanders vampires and the Passchendaele Ypres, the same horrible death as the victims of Gallipoli. Yeah, we've heard all about the drownings in the latrines. We've heard all around about perforating the bodies for fear of contagion. Latrines near Waterloo were reused as jokes in the Indian Rats movies. Let's see what you've got to say about that. Latrines near Waterloo reused as in the Indiana Jones Holy Grail quest. Can you remember when they drop into Vienna and they go into the underground below the church? The Holy Grail is a joke about the Holy Grail being in every church across the world. Yeah, that's on the church roofs. It's the little icons that are the goblins and the Gordon Brown images. They're big ears, and they're the mythological people that stave off evil, and they're all over the church roof. And that's the goblin joke. The goblet is the Holy Grail. Every church has the Holy Grail on it, and all of the churches are built in a Babylonian manner, like the financial centres, and all of that is denounced in all of the chapters of the Bible. But all of that is written by the people who now run financial services frauds, and it contrasts drastically, this statement says, with the Mithraeum, which is the underground movement where the orgies are run. Yeah, and that's where the bunny girls in the silk stockings are part of the joke. That is the Busby Barclay joke. That is the Victor Lowndes. That is the Harris family. The Harrises are involved in the Nuremberg inquests, and the people that used to live in the Stocks house that they now own and took over from Phil Edmonds, the elite Rhodesian cricketer who's in touch all the way to the bank with Bredenkamp, the war criminal, yeah, who makes the nuclear weapons and trades them all around the world. Yeah, the bunny girls are just part of the Puka Winnie the Pooh joke, and the bunnies in the Winnie the Pooh joke are Hitler's commanders-in-chief. And they get laundered out by the Pope into Latin America through Spain, which is used to train the IRA and the next terror threat that we have to suppress with false news all over the sectarian world. Okay, so this is turning the sad, sad story about the hellish trenches and the dysentery laxative jokes. Dysentery is a major cause of death in the trenches globally, and the reason that they're dug by the troops is because it's iconic. Yeah, they know that they're gonna die. They have to dig their own graves. And the stories about using the wooden perch and the Christian cross icon for them to shit on, yeah, in those places that are filthy and squalid, and the trenches and the latrines have to be redug in the same place. Yeah, it is vicious. And that is the Andrews liver salt joke. Let me show you that. It is, everybody will remember this if you're over 50. There they are. Enos is a place in Gallipoli. There's the St Andrews laxative liver salts that were on everybody's bathroom shelf. Everybody that I know in Scotland. Right then. And this is the transition into tourism now. So the site that we've got here for the vampire dugouts and all of the scams and stories about the Great Escape and the tunnels that they dug, they've now got tourist trips to there, and the people that die really young because they're prepared to make vicious films about profiteering in wartime and how easy it is to escape, and the numbers that were released by the Pisos in the killing of people in their 50s and in their 300s. It's just about the Jesus story. 300 is the Piso code number for Jesus, and that's why in the massacres of 3 by 100 people at a time in each regiment, it's the same story as in the King Arthur stories, and the massive capacity of King Arthur to save himself against thousands of people that are just Freemasonic and Piso code numbers. It's like Hitchcock appearing in his own movies. Okay, so this site is the site for Passchendaele and the Battle of the Lys. That's the Fleur de Lys. Yeah, massive killings in World War I. 100 Brigade, 33rd Division, 16th King's Royal Rifle Corps, 9th Battalion Highland Light Infantry, German Empire. 2nd Battalion Worcestershire Regiment. The vampire dugout, known locally in Belgium as Vampire, yeah, was the First World War underground brigade. And do you know, it's so close to the hole in the Maginot Line, and it's so close to the Waterloo area, it's uncanny. And the Waterloo area is just a joke about, you know, the victory that they had, yeah, and it is really, really sick. Rediscovered in 2007, it was the subject of a 2008 British television programme in the Channel 4 Time Teen series. Yeah, that's the Pratt and Sons joke, that's the Baldrick joke, that is all the interlocks with Jesus College Cambridge, with the British Army, the British Navy, and Lord Renfrew, yeah, of Came Thorne, yeah, being the Walt Disney Professor of Ancient History at Cambridge University, and the McDonald's Professor, yeah, with interlocks to the army leaders, the religious clerics, and it is really, really sick. And what you've got is the people that dig the trenches. If they survive the dysentery attacks because they're really good and innocent people and God protects them, they have to make sure that the horses get home safely. Yeah, yeah. And that is Butcher Haig's input. He then gets rewarded. He becomes the head of the Poppy Fund for a couple of decades. Then he becomes the head of St Andrews University, where the Queen's babies are educated before they go to Geelong and join Rupert Murdoch in the Geelong School in Australia near Botany Bay. Okay, after the war, 1920 onwards, brickworks development. They make them substantial buildings so the tourists can have health and safety protocols that keep them safe, as they spend a fortune visiting the graveyards where their unnamed relatives are interned in. And you should look at the graveyards in Gallipoli in that video I made a couple of days ago, and look at the postcards that I made on the sending the postcards home, yeah, to the Durham Light Infantry Museum. It is a vicious joke about the war dead being capable of writing, yeah, and asking their families back home if they can have a new clean pair of underpants, which is the dysentery Andrews liver salts joke all over again. Okay, I'm going to stop in a few minutes because I have not got pictures and I will be losing a lot of your attention span because of that. Okay, January 1918, moved 25,000 specialist tunnellers and 50,000 attached infantry who had been preparing and taking part in the Battle of Messines, 11 months to 1111, and the Poppy launch. Okay, June the 7th, 1917, shipping the people in to their deaths. Yeah, and the internment camps and the starvation of particularly the Russian people, because they're the communist menace, and that is the communist red colours, but it is also the red hexagram for the genocidal Rothschilds. And when they create Israel, by all of their scandals and the bungs that are paid to the American presidents, yeah, that appear in the museum jokes made by Ricky Gervais, yeah, then they change the colour of the hexagram to blue for Israel, and that is the Perron family frauds, all of their massive art treasures, their massive art galleries in Spain and in Latin America. And it is really, really sick that they can get away with it for so long. I don't think I had time, or I just find it so sickening to look at the pictures. The pictures are not translated from Wikipedia in that. So I'm going to stop there. I think you can see it. You can see how vicious it is. Yeah? And when you see the historians deliberately lying about what happens in our hospitals and their involvement in interlocking boards with the people that are the deviant doctors that are just play rolling at something that makes all patients and all mums, yet as I said, the Bolger case is a case that involves a corrupted Prime Minister in Australia. It might have been New Zealand, but that is the launch of the Jamie Bolger killing in Liverpool. And if it happens in Liverpool or in the Royal Infirmary or Birmingham, or it happens in the other slaving place, which is in the West Country, Bristol, yeah, all of the boiler rooms, all of the frauds, Lord Liverpool is in charge of vast tracts of India. All of the Governor Generals for all of those states come from our places. And I've mentioned the MacDonald linkage to the Professor of Ancient History at Cambridge, but the MacDonald linkage is not quite as evil as the Detweiler MacDonald joke. Detweiler MacDonald, Detweiler was the head of the Von Trapp family singers in the Sound of Music film. Detweilers MacDonalds are now the leading producers of drones to kill people on distant continents. You do not even now have to declare war. Okay? And you can see the flies are flying around here, and I get my messages from the gods in the skies all of the time, and they are delighted that this news is coming out despite the problems I've been having with my computer. And in the 2 days of revelations, we've got so much growth on those bushes already, it's just astounding. I'm going to stop and make another video later on the killings that occurred at the source of the Nile and the confluence of the blue and the white Nile. That's the Butcher Jones jokes and all of the jokes about the conflict at Khartoum. It's all a joke. All of it is 6,000 miles from home, and all of it is so that the troops can never come home. And the widows are obligated to remarry and sing the song about the willow being wrapped all around your hat. And the willows and the foot of the willow is just a joke about the Pisos, and all of it is vicious. Yeah, all of it is about mind control, and all of the stuff I told you about Maswich and BBC Light Entertainment and all of that mind control being imposed on 5-year-old children in the children's hour on the BBC. And what you've got in the Channel 4 empire is the Time Team, and you've got the same in the South Pacific, and you've got the same all across the world. The whole of the media base is owned by the world owners, and everything I talk about is in the newspapers within 6 hours as I make the video. within 6 hours of me making the video, because they're surveilling this place, and everything I make they're able to cover up. So Tom Hanks is actually a Rockefeller, and when I reported and made the video about Carenza Lewis and her husband being interlocked with all of the criminals in the Air Force sector, in the Army sector, and in the religious clerics sector, and the Navy sector, then Tom Hanks's girlfriend had had a double mastectomy, and it was on the front page of the Scottish newspapers in Lord Sainsbury's supermarket just over the top of that house. And that house is just like the icon that is used in the Maswich Children's Hour, because it is the gable end that looks like a pyramid, which was part of the opening sequence of the Bill and Ben and Flower Put Men joke, and all of the Andy Pandy stuff, and the bringing in a Ted, that's Teddy Roosevelt, throwing the toys out of the cot. All of them are dressed in the same clothes as the death camp victims in the Holocaust. It is absolutely ruthless, and that man Maswich is a leader at MI6, at the Special Operations Executive. He makes Hollywood movies. He's in touch with the New World Order elite writers that include Enid Blyton and all of the Bloomsbury set, and all of the Freuds, and all of the people like the Wittgensteins who get unhinged over the course of time because of their role in life. Yeah, and that's happening to a lot of my neighbours, my old contacts, and all of the people that have been treasonous to me and to the world that they live in. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. Okay, there's the Caradoc, and contrast that with what happened to the icon for the working man, the SS, I think it was the City of Glasgow, or the something Clyde. It's a steamer, it's a collier, because they know that the time for coal is over and done with, and they're going to be replaced by by petrol driven ships. That's why they need the oil wealth on the Russian steppes, and that's why this was made in 1918 and was modernized in 1938, just in time 39 steps to World War II, and the next profiteering exercise and the communist menace is portrayed underground on the bottom of the vessel, yet which is where the torpedo would hit it. All of the people are involved on all sides in the profiting exercise, and all of it is going to be ground to a halt by me and the gods in the next few months. Yeah, it is really refreshing to understand how the world fails to work, and you can see the pressure on the world leaders now, and the pathologies that they get, and the disappearance of the Quisling newsreaders from their stools in the Quisling news vents. Okay, last time I saw Ali Moffat, he was looking ever so nervous. Bye bye.